Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So today's video may be like hot take day, I don't know. I'm gonna be real interested to see the response because what I thought we would do, and I have been, Lord knows, I've been thinking about this video for nigh on 2 years, and that is because I wanted to talk about the last 10 books I DNF'd with you guys and like why I DNF'd them. And to do that, I only wanted to talk about books where I got enough into them that I feel like I have something meaningful to say beyond just like, I didn't like it or it wasn't working for me or whatever, because I very frequently dip out of a book at about 50 pages. Like I really have no problem DNFing things in general. So basically I didn't want to have an entire video of me just being like, yeah, I just wasn't in the mood for it or whatever. And also some of these books are books that I have permanently DNF'd, and some of these are books that I plan to come back to. So anyway, I think there's going to be some beloved books in here. So that's where I worry a little bit about the Hot Take Tuesday or whatever this is. But yeah, I think that it'll be an interesting conversation. And there's very few of these that I'm like, this is terrible. Like nobody should ever, actually I don't think any of these I would say like nobody should ever read this. These are more just like, these are books that didn't work for me and here's why. And we will talk about whether or not they are permanent DNFs or if I think that I will come back to them at some point in my life's journey. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on in. Okay, so the book that was the first one that I collected for this list was Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. So I have recently been seeing some reviews of the final book that make me more happy that I decided to DNF that book / that series when I did. But I will say that many people absolutely love Nevernight. This is a darling of the booktube fantasy reading community, and I can see why, because when I was in it, I was like, there's a lot of elements of this that I really like and wish I was connecting with more in terms of the type of story. So there's like an assassin school, and there's this girl who's bent on getting revenge, Mia, I think is her name, for the death of her father and against those who have wronged her father. So like, I think that's a compelling plot engine. It's an interesting world. I also frankly think that the cover designs of these books do them a lot of favors in terms of really being very evocative of a mood. For me, I will say that something that some people do not like are the footnotes. Like they complain about those. I actually quite like fiction that is heavy in footnotes. I find that to be very charming, or in like sort of like David Foster Wallace style. If it's done well, I really enjoy a footnote. So that didn't bother me. What I couldn't get past, and what did quite bother me, was the authorial voice itself. So I struggle to even try to quantify what it was, because this is so idiosyncratic that sometimes you just get into a book and there is something about the writing style that even if you can see that objectively it's fine, like there's nothing wrong with it, it just doesn't work for you or doesn't connect for you. And there was something about, there's almost like an opacity to the narration or to the storytelling style that just kept me feeling like I was being held a little bit at arm's length in a way that made it very difficult for me to really get into the story. So I felt like I was always just sort of like a little bit distant from what was actually going on. And that I just struggled with and ultimately couldn't get into the world enough to feel like it was worth it to get through, you know, a pretty decent sized book. So I read enough to see that there was a lot there that I probably would like if I could get into it, but I just acknowledged to myself that I wasn't able to just really get into the flow, and therefore I wasn't enjoying the book, and I didn't want to spend more time with it. So I think that's an example of something where it was very much just like a personal reading, like a reader's taste and the writer's style just like didn't line up. I am going to try some other stuff from Jay Kristoff. I have Aurora Rising, so I think it's right behind me actually. That's on my TBR. So I'm definitely open to reading more from him, but this particular book did not work for me. And again, just based on some of the rant reviews I've been watching, because I do love a rant review, I'm very glad I did not continue, because the way that this series wraps up based on those reviews, I would not be into. So this, I think that ended up being a good decision. The next one I want to talk about is not a permanent DNF. It's what I would call on strike one, and that is The Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. So this is a book that I call it, I have like a 3 strikes and you're out rule, where there's sometimes books that I encounter that I'm like, you know what, I really think that this is about mood for me, and that if I were in a different mood, I would be really enjoying this, and that is what Magpie Murders ended up being. So I think when I was going into it, I thought it wasn't quite what I was expecting, and therefore I wasn't getting into it. You know, actually, I didn't put it on this list, but I probably should have. I don't see it behind me, but Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand is very much the same thing, where I was like, you know what, there's nothing wrong with this book. I think if I was in the right mood for it, I would probably be enjoying it, but I was expecting something different. So and that's why I temporarily DNF'd it, and that is for The Magpie Murders, that it's very much a story within a story, and the story that is within the story is meant to be sort of a take on Hercule Poirot. So that is right up my alley, right? Like, that's in theory something I should really like, but I didn't quite understand that about the book going into it. So when I encountered that, it just wasn't hitting me the right way. And I have previously read a different book from Anthony Horowitz. I believe it was The House of Silk, which was a continuation of the Sherlock Holmes verse. And I quite enjoyed that book. Like, I really liked the author's writing style in that. And I really would like to come back to Magpie Murders. And actually, it's been about 18 months at this point. So I think I may put it back into rotation of the next time that type of mood strikes, to put it up on the docket. But anyway, that and Sawkill Girls are both examples of like, oh, I didn't quite understand what this book was, so I didn't pick the right mood to try to read it. So it's on strike one. I will give a book like that usually 3 strikes before I officially DNF it. So we'll see if I can get on with it better when that kind of mood strikes again. So next is Wintersong by S Jae Jones, which is a YA kind of like Tamlin type story, really, that I DNF'd probably after about 100-ish pages because it was just far too angsty for me. One thing that I do sometimes when I'm thinking about DNFing a book is I will read the ending to see if I like the ending. I've talked about this before. I'm very much a how reader and not a what reader, so spoilers as such don't really bother me. I mean, sometimes, obviously. I have a very expansive vision of what all I can know about a book without it being diminished in its enjoyment for me, and one of those things is the ending. Usually, unless it's like a whodunit and I'm trying to figure out whodunit, barring that, I'm pretty open to knowing what the ending is and then just going along for the journey of finding out how we get there. So sometimes if I'm thinking about DNFing a book, all that to say, I will go ahead and skip to the ending and see if I like that. And if I do, I'll say like, okay, cool. So like, I may not be loving where it is right now, but I'm intrigued by kind of the overall journey. So like, let's keep going. This is an example where when I got to the ending, I was like, oh, this is even angstier. So this is just not going to work for me. And actually my next one, I believe, is Artemis by Andy Weir. I had a very similar kind of journey with it. I was really stalling out with it. I had it as a strike one book for a while. I tried, I think, 2 previous occasions to get through it. And on the 3rd time, I think I'd made it to maybe like 100 or 100, maybe like 150 pages in. And I was like, I'm just not enjoying really anything that's going on here. Let me get to the ending and see if I like that. I read the ending, wasn't interested in it, and said, you know, I'm just going to throw in the towel on this. So both of those are ones that I attempted to like better by reading the ending. And in both cases, that didn't end up working out for me. So those are 2 other DNFs that I've had that are permanent DNFs. Okay, next is a book that actually I probably should have put first because this is the one I DNF'd the longest ago, and it's one of the factors that compelled me to go ahead and make this video today, which is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. Now, if you guys watch my channel, you will know that The Woman in White is one of my all-time favorite books, really, and definitely one of my all-time favorite classics, and I began The Moonstone probably 6 or 7 years ago now, and this is essentially a book that was a victim of me just getting distracted from it and never having come back to it. This week it is on my TBR, so I'm finally going to finish it. But this is literally just a situation where I liked what I was reading, but I'm a goldfish and I got distracted by a shiny book and I just kind of forgot that I'd been working on this and I never came back to it. So yeah, I'm excited to finally finish it, but this is a great example of where sometimes a DNF, A, is not permanent, and B, is no reflection on the actual like quality of the book or even my desire to finish it. Sometimes DNFs are just like a victim of circumstance. And actually, this next one is on the exact same note. Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. I was really enjoying this book. This is not a difficult book to get through, but when I was moving earlier this year, I kind of lost track of my copy of it, and I've just never gone back to actually polish it off. I own the next one. I was really enjoying what I was reading from it, but literally this is just like, oh, I couldn't find my copy, therefore got distracted by all my other shiny books and never came back to read this one. So I have it as a goal to go ahead. My goal is to finish both of these this year. I think I might save this for like Christmas. This seems like a good kind of like cozy, quick read to finish off with. So anyway, Nevermore is definitely a great example of something where I was really enjoying it, but I lost my copy and therefore accidentally DNF'd it, and I need to come back and rectify that. Okay. Next is probably my least favorite book of the year, and I feel like I read enough of it to consider it a least favorite book, even though I DNF'd it. That is Space Opera by Catherynne M. Valente. I read more than half of this book. I read 60% of this book and literally could not bring myself to read another page. This is an example of, again, kind of authorial voice, and that I will tell you, usually I bail on a book because of authorial voice more than anything else, but usually I will do it very quickly. This is an example of one where I do not enjoy her writing style. I think I've got one more book of hers on my TBR that I will try, but we'll talk about the other one. But I've tried 2 books from her so far, and both times didn't enjoy her writing and kind of her approach to being a prose stylist. I just actively didn't enjoy it. And then in this book's case, I was having such a bad time that I wanted to like her so badly because I love the variety of books she writes. I really enjoy the premises she has in her books often. Like, there's a lot to enjoy and things that I, in theory, like on paper, when it's described to me, I'm like, yeah, I would like that. But then when it actually comes to the book, I don't like it. And so, yeah, that was a very bitter pill to swallow because I really wanted to enjoy that book. But I got 60% of the way through and I was like, I am actively angry about spending my time on this at this point. So I've got to dip. Like, we can't keep doing this. Then we have another big disappointment because this author wrote my second favorite novel of all time, which is The Remains of the Day. That is The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is one that was on my 19 books that I want to read in 2019 list. I put it on there because I was like, oh, I keep meaning to, just get through this because I really, I absolutely adore The Remains of the Day, which is his take on sort of a historical fiction trope. I really enjoyed Never Let Me Go, which is his take on sort of dystopia. And so, yeah, like I'm way into the idea of his take on, a parable or like fantasy, basically. So yeah, let's do this. And this is an example of a book that I think if I had pressed on, I would have not hated it. I think it was going to be somewhere between a 2 and 3 star book. But, as I was reading, I just was sitting there thinking, why am I going to invest another 3, 4, 5 hours in something that I already know I'm not going to give more than a 2 or a 2.5 star to? And I will do that for books where it's just scratching a trope itch. So I'm much more likely to press forward and finish up a 2 to 3 star mystery or romance or something like that, where it really is just like, oh, today I just want a country house mystery. Like, that's the trope I'm really into. Like, just give it to me. Or today I really just want an enemies to lover book. This isn't the best, but whatever, just give me that trope. It's like brain candy almost to me. For fantasy, I don't quite have that relationship to tropes. Like, it's very, I don't really think I have a mood where I'm like, I don't care about if I'm really actively enjoying this chosen one trope. I just want a chosen one trope, so just give it to me. I could see other people having that mode, but for me, that's just not one of the types of books that really works for me on. So anyway, all that to say, I just realized like this isn't scratching enough of an itch. And I don't like this enough to make it worth it for me to finish it. So yeah, that was definitely a huge disappointment because, like I said, he wrote my second all-time favorite book. He's definitely capable of writing things that I love, but this particular one just wasn't really connecting to me. And so I decided to kind of cut my losses and move on. Okay, and so now we return to Radiance, which is also by Catherynne and Valente. This is my second attempt to like a Catherynne and Valente book. This was a book that I had picked up probably about 2 years ago, just on the strength of the premise. It sounded super cool, like essentially sci-fi, alternative history Hollywood, and sort of like not like a straightforward narrative style. Like it wasn't told just like in, normal sort of like, this happens, this happens, this happens. Like there's a lot of like interviews and like meta commentary, and I really like that normally. But again, I'm just finding that Catherynne and Valente as a prose stylist is just tough for me and just not really something I enjoy. And that bums me out because I really want to like her so badly. I am going to try one more time. I have The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland and A Ship of Her Own Making on my e-reader, and I'm hoping because it's a middle grade, I tend to like that kind of whimsical tone a little bit better sometimes in children's literature. But for adult literature, it just really doesn't read well to me. I was not enjoying myself, and I liked it better than space opera. I liked Radiance better than space opera, but I still ultimately didn't like it, and therefore I was supposed to be doing it as a buddy read with Leanna from Leanna's Library, and I was kind of grousing to her about it on Voxer, and she was like, well, girl, just don't read it. I won't read it either. It's fine. We'll just cancel the buddy read. I'm like, okay, I appreciate that clarity of direction, and I'll just dip. And finally, the book that got me to 10, though now that I remembered Sawkill Girls should have been on this list, I could have avoided having to talk to you guys about this, and that is that I've recently DNFed Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Whew, okay. I am not really sure. I'm not really sure what my future with Brandon Sanderson is going to look like. I appreciated the gee whiz factor of his world building and magic system for sure, because if you don't know, Warbreaker is essentially like magic based on colors and like infusing colors into things, and like, anyway, it was an interesting magic system, which is really, I think, what Brandon Sanderson is usually most praised for. And if that is what you most value in a fantasy, I 100% see why his stuff would interest you, because again, I agree it's a cool premise and he's clearly thought it through in a lot of detail. That doesn't tend to be what I really value in a fantasy. For me, I want the world building to be enough that it feels like I can get immersed in what's going on. And I want it to create interesting conflict potential or like different plot potentials. I also really want it to be very character focused. That tends to be what I enjoy. Like fantasies I enjoy the most tend to have a cool world that is believable enough that it doesn't, for me, super detailed world building honestly just starts to feel sort of masturbatory to me. It's just not doing anything for me as the reader. I know other readers like it better than I do, but for me, it doesn't do a lot. So like, I just want like enough of the world building to set up cool plot conflict. And then I really want to like really invest and dig in with the characters. I'm not sure if it's because his writing style is pretty straightforward. I'm not really sure what it was. It read quite like YA fantasy to me, and I have a specific mood I'm in when I want YA fantasy, and the mood I was in was not for that. Like I was in the mood for something a little meatier, like a little bit just like more substantial adult fantasy. That was what I was, and it was just starting to put me in a slump. Like I was dreading getting back to it. Like I couldn't make progress with it, and there was nothing like terribly wrong about it. It just wasn't sitting right with me for whatever reason, for whatever mood I was in or whatever. So I think probably my road forward with Sanderson is that I will, when I'm in the mood for YA fantasy, and again, I take that it's not actually YA fantasy, it's just how it was reading to me, and that it seemed to fit more when I'm in a YA fantasy kind of mood. I will probably pick up Mistborn because I do own the first 3 novels of Mistborn, so I would really like to like it because I enjoy those editions. And I will see how I do with that. If I don't enjoy that, I think I'm probably going to say Sanderson is just not for me, but we'll see how things progress. The other thing, frankly, is that I think I'd be more willing to give him a chance if I didn't have a BookTube channel, but I honestly kind of don't look forward to people trying to persuade me to love him because he has such a passionate fan base. That doesn't sound very enjoyable to me. So I'm honestly, because of that, less inclined to try a lot with him, because I honestly just don't want to have to talk to you guys about it if I don't end up liking it. So, you know, I don't know that for whatever that says about the state of online bookishness, but that's just the case. So yeah, anyway, that brings us to the last 10 books I DNF that were like significant and I had something to say about. I think what you can see in through lines in terms of why I DNF things is definitely mood. I'm a mood reader, and I think that always impacts kind of where I'm at in terms of how much I'm gonna like a book for sure, but then also like if I can even get on with it and finish it. I think the authorial voice is definitely something that is most likely to make me bail on something. And then sometimes it's just a mismatch of like, oh, this book was sort of like this and I just don't really like that, it turns out. Whatever that says about me, there you go. So yeah, I think that will do it for this video. So definitely let me know maybe the last book you DNF'd, or if you were unable to DNF a book that you wish you were sitting through resenting, wishing that you could let yourself DNF it. Definitely let me know that below. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. So if you did, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all of that information listed in the description box below, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye.